Hey guys, okay, another video. This is third edition. Third edition. I've changed a few things now. I actually had a question from one of the subscribers asking me about a guide using Asus, and since I've been on a gigabyte setup, Asus is actually quite different. The BIOS is a lot different than gigabyte, and I'll also give a quick warning here. I've actually got very little experience using an Asus board. It's been a while since I've been on one, but Asus team has been kind enough to send me the world record breaking motherboard that's broken more world records than any other launch, and namely Maximus XII Extreme. Just killed something, but yeah, that's the guy. So I'll just go over basic guide though. I'm using a different chip, so we'll go through core basic settings, and then we're going to go through some more advanced settings in terms of memory clocking. So let's get straight into it. Okay, let's do a quick Asus Z490 overclocking guide. So I have gone and done a little bit of pre-testing, so just to save us time, I'll just start with a basic profile. Now I am using a different CPU to the chip that I used in my initial videos, so the results will not be the same, and I don't know whether that was the reason why I managed to get more memory frequency, but I think it's the board as well. This motherboard only has 2 DIMM slots. I'm currently on the Maximus XII Apex. This is the board that Team Asus used to break all the world records. So yeah, I managed to get the memory up a little bit higher, but let's just go over the main settings. So this is the main menu that you're going to boot in. It's an interesting one. On the right side, Asus actually has a lot of AI or artificial intelligence functions. So the BIOS will study the performance of your PC if you enable that or leave it on auto, and will give you indications on what you can expect in terms of what kind of voltage and frequency you can set. So as you can see on the right, it's actually giving some predictions there on non-AVX loads, 1.317, load line calibration 4, etc, etc. So it's giving some hints. I think as you use the CPU and stress it more, I think it'll learn more. So I don't think that this is quite accurate yet, but that's really interesting. Asus must have done a lot of groundwork to get that working. So I'm going to my favorites menu now. My favorites menu is interesting because it gives you all the key settings for your overclock. So what I've done here, it's a bit of a manual overclock. So I've also gone for memory clock and everything else. But anyway, so what I've done is I've selected to sync all cores, so top. Then I've gone and selected 50, which is the ratio. So 50 times 100 is 5 gigahertz or 5,000 megahertz. So I'm shooting for 5 gigahertz overclock. I've selected on this particular memory kit, I've selected DDR 3600 megahertz. That's what it's officially rated for. This was the initial overclock, so I've gone with 1.25 volts. I've set memory voltage a little bit higher. So just set whatever your memory is rated for here, and as well as the megahertz. So megahertz and voltage. Set whatever your memory is rated for. The other stuff that I've changed is not in my favorites menu. It's actually in Extreme Tweaker. So we're going to go to that. So I've gone and removed all limits. enabled multi-core enhancement, and let me just see whether I'm pretty sure that I've gone and changed load line. Yeah, so I've set level 4. Now, I'm pretty sure that we should be shooting for level 6 or 7 from what I've seen my guys use in terms of, you know, overclocking and whatnot. So I've just gone very conservative here. So I've got 4. So as the higher the level, the better the load line calibration, as in the less voltage movement there will be. I didn't change anything else here. Probably should, but I didn't encounter any major issues in terms of stability. So we're going to go back now. So this is a very basic profile that I've set. The other thing that I've done is ring or cache ratio. I've set it to 45. So I've gone ahead and already set so all you have to do is set the minimum cache ratio. In terms of voltage, this isn't completely necessary. The only one here that's necessary is 1.25 on CPU voltage override, and I've also selected manual mode for this manual overclock. But I've also gone ahead and selected memory voltage. I've also selected VCC IO and system agent. VCC IO and system agent are important if you're going to push high frequency memory and tighten your latency. So if you are not going to do that, if you're just going to run stock and spec, you're probably going to be setting 1.3 or 1.35 for a decent kit, and you're going to just leave this at auto. And if it's stable, leave it at auto. If it's not stable, you can go ahead and set. You can use what I've set here, or you can maybe try a little bit lower, but that's where it's at. So that's the only stuff I've changed that I can remember changing. Let me just double check. So I'll just go to CPU config, make sure that's right. Now I haven't done anything here. I'll just go through all the options so you can see. I haven't touched any of these actually. So that should be fine. I did not set RAM timings in the initial BIOS, so I've left everything in auto. This memory will default at CAS 15, and in fact this motherboard has been setting tighter timings than the other motherboard that I've used in the previous guide, so that's nice. So I've been getting CAS 15 even at very high clocks. Kudos to Asus for training that in BIOS. I would initially advise just to go with this as is. Don't do any more changes. F10. So I'm just saving changes and I'm going to hit enter. So F10 enter. We are going to let the system boot. Okay, we've just booted to Windows. You've seen all the settings that I've set. What we're going to do is use CPU-Z. You can download CPU-Z and check whether you've managed to set all of those. One thing that may end up changing for you though is because we haven't turned off any of the CPU functions in terms of speed step and turbo, this may end up dropping to a lower frequency, like a power saving mode. But for now, it's actually holding. So we've set 1.25 and we've set load line calibration at 4. I'm going to just do a fast CPU-Z. So let's just check the motherboard tab as well. So motherboard is the Maximus XII Apex, BIOS 0403, memory, as you can see, it's 3600, 1800 times 2, CAS 15, as I've said. This motherboard is selecting pretty tight latency, which is really nice. That'll improve our performance. Cache is at 4.5 gigahertz. Don't ignore this NB frequency. That's an old way of it used to be called Northbridge, but now it's actually cache or ring bus, so it's a little different. And this is the memory kit that I'm using. As you can see, this motherboard only has 2 RAM slots, so it's just reading the kit that I'm using. I'm using an RTX 2060 graphics card. Okay, so did you see how it flipped back to, yeah, so it's still got that speed step turbo thing, but once you load up the CPU, it will actually run at the desired frequency. So we'll just run 1M just so we can verify that it'll stay at, so all the cores are staying at 5 gigahertz, as you can see. So during load, all the cores are loading up as they should. So we will end up turning that off. So I will show you a second BIOS option. So I'll just leave this running. So I've left all the, you can right click on CPU Z to show all cores and what they're doing. So we're just going to let this finish now, and then I'll go into BIOS and show you a more advanced setup in BIOS. Okay, we are back in BIOS. We are on main menu. I've reset the BIOS because we tried XDU and it failed. I think it was because of the load line calibration. So let's not worry about that too much now. Let's go to Profile 6. Profile 6 has a huge memory overclock. So I want to take you through a higher memory overclock. Now this kit is not amazing that I've got, this memory kit. So guys are using a newer variation of Samsung ICs and are reaching 4800 megahertz CAS 14. So, but I've actually managed to reach 4400 with this kit, which is a first, which is fantastic. I think with the other board I've only managed to get up to 4133. But like I said, different CPU, different IMC, different motherboard, a lot of different variables. So I didn't really truly compare the two properly. Anyway, let's go over the settings for the a more advanced version using higher memory clocks, and also you'll see some differences in the voltage that I've been setting. So 5 gigahertz again, I've gone and adjusted the vCore a little bit, so I've gone with 1.28, just slightly more. DRAM, as you can see, is actually quite high now. This is Samsung IC. They can take up to 2.1 volts. It's not a big deal. I do have active air cooling. I am planning to use this sort of memory in extreme overclocking. Obviously for 24/7, this should not be considered, in my opinion. I think you should try and find a something a little bit more reasonable in terms of voltage. So my first initial suggestion is probably more in the money, so up to about 1.5 volts. Okay, so I'm just sifting through different menus here. So one thing that I've disabled, as you can see here, is C states. Now that allows the CPU essentially to flick through various memory frequencies. We don't want that. We want the CPU to be holding steady, so as in staying at the frequency that we've set. I've gone through all of the options in my favorites. That's all done. So let's go to the extreme tweaker menu. So same menu as before. I left AI tune out auto. It doesn't really matter. I can probably disable it, but I'm just leaving it as is. So I've gone and left all of these options as they are. Nothing new here. We're talking 50 again. So what I've done here is, as you can see, one new change here is the DDR4 frequency. Now it's at 4400 instead of, I think it was 3600 initially. I've also gone and changed timings. I've only set primary timing, so CAS 14 36, and I've gone with a tighter TRFC as well. Everything else I've left at auto. The VRM, I probably should set this to 6 or 7, but that's okay. I'll leave it as is for now. I'm only going to test SuperPi, so the load is not going to be very high. I haven't touched anything here. Again, that is, if you are trying to go for extreme overclocking, you may want to just max out all these values so that you're not being held back by over current or over voltage protection or anything like that, because a lot of these boards do have that built in to protect the CPU itself. I have not changed anything here, so we are just going to go through these. I have left this again at auto. It's actually training, it's looking at my cooler as well. So when you look at the right menu and predictions, it actually tells you how good your CPU is, that 78 ranking. So this CPU is pretty crap. And the cooler is rated 182 points. I don't really know if that's good or not, but it's just I'm using a Corsair 240 AIO, nothing special. So I wouldn't expect my cooler to be, amazing. I've also increased the cache ratio now to 48 instead of 45. Now, and these are the 3 volts that are actually quite extreme now. Now, like I said, I am planning to use this memory and this CPU Sub-Zero, not this CPU, but this memory actually. I'll change to a better CPU, Sub-Zero, and I'm going to be using higher voltage. So VCCIO 1.5 is actually quite high, as is agent voltage. I would not recommend using this for 24/7. So the initial setup is probably a little bit more, or should be a little bit more to your liking. Let me just go through some of these other menus so you can see what's been set and what hasn't. As you can tell, I haven't really done a hell of a lot to, set anything in, concrete here. But I'm just going through the menu so you can see what I've done. So let's do that. I haven't touched any of these, so I may as well just. Nope, I'm not getting out of it yet. Okay, so that's that. So I've gotten to the bottom of this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to save this, and we're going to go to Windows. The only thing that we've changed this time around was going from loadline calibration 6 to loadline calibration 7. XTU did not pass with loadline calibration 6, but it did get further, so that does tell me that loadline settings are working. I'm just not setting the right settings. Now, again, warning, this is not the same CPU. This CPU is definitely not a great overclocker. Probably one of the worst ones I've tested. But anyway, so we've got 1.28 set in BIOS, load line 7. I'm going to run XTU again. Okay, so we do have a benchmark result. So loadline 7 is probably a good idea in terms of calibration. I did notice here that the voltage did drop to 1.25. Now I will need to solder some read points. I did actually see some read points on the motherboard. I might actually check those with a fluke. Later I'll do some more testing to get an understanding of what different levels of load line are actually doing in terms of voltage drop and voltage droop. So that's a new video that I'm going to do at another point. Okay, just to recap. So we've gone and tested the Asus board, found a few interesting things there. So the Maximus XII Apex, 2D board, very good RAM overclocker. Also has seems to be setting tighter timings when you're setting auto memory. We managed to reach 4400 megahertz cache 14, quite impressive. The other thing I found out was that loadline level 4 is not very good, and as in there's a lot of droop there, so you need to jack it up to probably about 7. I'm going to do a little bit more testing in future on loadline, and I'm going to use my Fluke to actually test or measure the voltage drop and droop. So look out for that video as well. Thank you. Bye.